Okay. A strange law from the Beit Yosef and a comment from the Rama, Reb Moshe Isler. Okay, here we're going to see a couple of arguments between the Mechaber, Reb Yosef Cairo, and Rabbi Moshe Isler that he writes in the smaller letters. Usually Rabbi Yosef Cairo, he was a Sephardic Jew, so the Sephardic Jews very, very often go according to what he says. And the Rama, Reb Moshe Isler, he's the Ashkenazic view. Not always, it's not, but generally speaking, it is. Both of them were incredibly holy men, amazing geniuses, remembered everything, knew everything. But the one who really went down in history was the Rabbi Yosef Cairo, that he wrote the Shulchan Aruch. So if you remember correctly, we learned a law that if a piece of meat falls into milk, that you get a non-Jew to taste it, the milk. The meat is forbidden, but the milk could be permissible. You get a non-Jew to taste it, and if the non-Jew tastes the taste of meat, then it's forbidden. The milk is forbidden. If a non-Jew does not taste the taste of milk, then it's permissible, says the Rambam, says the Mechaber. Interesting law. The Rama will say that nowadays we can't trust non-Jews. Nowadays, the non-Jews also don't know what they're talking about. If they taste meat, they don't taste meat in your milk. So we always have to go according to 60. That's what the Rama is going to say. Rab Moshe Isler, that's Rama. Rab Moshe Isler. Isserlis. Then the Mechaber says a very interesting thing, a very strange thing. He says that if a piece of meat falls into the pot, then, like we said before, you get a non-Jew to taste it. But there's sometimes that we don't rely on a non-Jew, even according to he's called the Mechaber. The Mechaber means the author. That we don't rely on a non-Jew. And when is that? If we let the piece of meat in the pot and then turned off the fire, and the pot got gradually cooled off. Because then what happens, here's this very, very strange dynamics. I don't think this has yet been proven scientifically, but he claims like this, that if you have a piece of meat that falls into milk and you pull that piece out, then what do we say? If you pull it out, then only the taste of the meat went into the milk. And we don't say that there's milk that went into that piece of meat and then came out of the meat. If that happens, then you can't taste it anymore. So again, what does the Mechaber say? A piece of meat fell into a pot of milk. Let's say there's 60 ounces of meat. I'm sorry. Let's say there's 60 ounces of milk, and there falls in that 60 ounces of milk a big 2-ounce piece of meat. If so, you don't have 60 against that meat, you only have 30. Says the Mechaber, I don't care. If you pull that piece of meat out, then get a non-Jew, he tastes the milk, he tells you, does it have a meaty taste in it or not? No meaty taste, permissible. Says, when can you rely on a non-Jew? If you pull the piece out. But if you left that piece of meat in the milk, says the Mechaber, you left the piece of meat in the milk and you let the milk cool down, then what happens is a little bit sort of a different law over here. We say that the milk went into the meat, and as soon as it starts to cool down, then it goes back out of the meat. All the time that it was boiling, it doesn't come out. It just goes in and it doesn't come out. Strange, but that's what he says. So therefore, the only thing that comes out of the meat all the time this pot is boiling is the taste of meat. And taste, you can get a non-Jew to ascertain. But as soon as it starts cooling off, then what happens in the milk that was inside of this meat, the milk that was in there, it gets spit out. And that milk is 100% forbidden, even though it doesn't have 100% taste meat in it. So that milk now is forbidden, but it tastes like milk. At least a little bit tastes like milk. So therefore you can't measure anymore. The non-Jew can't measure this new milk that came out of the piece, and therefore you always have to have 60 if you let the pot cool down. That's what he said. Let's look at the Ramah in Aleph.
Interesting. It's a basic concept in cooking, that you let the meat relax, and when it does, the blood and everything just relaxes as it cools off, and that's what's happening when the milk comes down. Very interesting.
Very good. Excellent.
So you could do the test with water. You could, to clear water, you could put a piece of meat in clear water, boil it, and then as it stops boiling and as it cools down in the water, the blood would start, as you say, the meat will start resting and it will start coming out. And once you take it out, it will rest even more, but it starts resting as the liquid cools. Yeah. Okay.
You could do that. But here what he's saying is like this. You have a pot of milk, meat falls into it, pull the meat out, and tell a non-Jew to taste the milk, and it'll be okay. We don't do that. Look, we'll see. Nobody does it today. No one does it. Who calls a non-Jew and has him taste it? I never heard it. Maybe there are very great rabbis. It could be that maybe there are very great Sephardic rabbis that they do trust a non-Jew to taste. Could be. I don't know. Here, let's look at the Ramah. The Ramah says, Ayin La'el, look above in Siman Tzaddik Chet. That's going to be the beginning of the laws of Taruvot. Te'en anu noagim, we do not, this is the Ramah I'm reading, we do not have the custom smoke to rely on the tasting of a non-Jew. And all the time, be'inan, it is always required, Samach 60 in any case. Okay, that was what happened. This law, Aleph, is when a piece of meat falls into the milk. What happens if milk falls into the meat? Let's look and see. Nafal chalav letoch kaderish al basar. If milk falls on a pot of meat, cholent. Okay, now this here will have two different scenarios. There's going to be a big argument about this. The pot of meat is filled with meat. And the milk falls on one piece of the meat. One piece of meat. Okay, now this milk falls on the one piece of meat. Where is this piece of meat? Let's just say, for our purposes, to make it easy, this piece of meat was laying on the top of all the other pieces of meat. It popped out of the stew, and it got caught on top of these other pieces of meat. But it's boiling hot. You got all these steam coming up, and it's boiling hot. And now milk falls on this piece of meat that is resting on top of the others, but it's not in the stew. So because it's not in the stew, the water of the stew does not add up to the 60. The piece has to stand alone against the milk. Does the piece have 60 in it or does it not? So that's what he says. According to the Machaber, we learned that we go according to taste. We get a goy to taste. You can't taste it. Maybe it's forbidden. You get a non-Jew to come and taste it and says, tell me, Ivan, does this piece of meat have the taste of milk in it or not? It says, Nafal chalav, if there fell a drop of milk, latoch kadera, in a pot of meat. Tomi machaticha, the non-Jew tastes the piece of meat that fell on it, the milk. Im en botam, if there is no taste of milk, akol mutter, then everything is permissible. Yesh bo b'chaticha, v'yesh, I'm sorry, v'im yesh b'chaticha, but if there is in the piece of meat, mitamias chalav, if this piece of meat does have a milk taste in it, the non-Jew says it tastes like milk, ne'asra oto chaticha, this piece becomes forbidden alone. and all the other pieces are permissible. Take this one piece, throw it away, you got no problems. Ulididan, but according to us, the Ein Somchin, I'm reading the Ramah now, that we do not rely on the taste of a non-Jew. You always have to have 60 in the piece. And if not, then all of them are forbidden. Says the Mechaber that if that piece is forbidden, then only it is forbidden. Says the Ramah, if that piece is forbidden, it makes everything else forbidden. How so? Why so? This is going to be a big argument. We're going to have to get into this next time. Then all the other pieces are forbidden. And then now we measure in all the rest. If all of the other pieces have 60 against this piece, then the piece still remains forbidden and everything is permissible. We're going to go over this law. But in the morning, what are we talking about? That this piece, if this piece is forbidden, it makes all the other pieces forbidden if there's not 60 against the piece, not against the milk anymore, against the whole entire piece. This whole piece of meat becomes like one big piece of nevela. What are we talking about? If when the drop of milk fell on this piece, you left it there for a minute, enough time for the piece to absorb it. But if as soon as that milk fell on the piece, the shalom niyar, if you stirred up the pot, but if you stirred up that pot from beginning to end, we'll see what this means, beginning to end, or even if you covered it over so it starts to boil more, then all you have to have is 60 against the drop of milk. Okay, we talked about this law before, and I'll just mention it to you again. I'll mention this to you again. According to all opinions, if milk falls on meat and there is not 60 in that piece of meat, then the whole entire piece becomes 100% Isser. What does this mean? Let's take simple meaning. You have a piece of meat that's 59 ounces big. 59 ounces big. And this piece of meat's 59 ounces big, right? It's inside of a pot that has 30,000 ounces of meat. 30,000. Is that right? Yeah. Okay, so here again, let's take it. What do we have? 59 and not 30,000, 60,000. 60,000 ounces of meat. Or, let's make it simple. Let's just make this simple. We have one piece of meat that's 1 ounce big. And it is in a pot of meat that is 59 ounces of meat. 59 ounces of meat. And you have 1/59th of an ounce of milk. Huh? And this 1/59th of an ounce of milk falls on that piece of meat. 1/59th of an ounce of milk. What is that? That's like, what is it? Something of a pint. Anyway, tremendous. 1/59th of an ounce of milk. Let's say that is about as big as, let's say this. 1/59th of an ounce of milk. How much can this 1/59th of an ounce of milk make forbidden? Well, it can make forbidden almost 3,600 times as much as itself. Milk, little drop of milk, 3,600 times as much as itself. How so? Because if this little drop of milk falls on a piece of meat, and that piece of meat does not have 60 times as much as this milk, let's say it has 59 times, so that meat now becomes 59, whatever it is, ounces or whatever, of Isser. That piece of meat becomes totally forbidden. So this meat is 59 times as big as this little piece of meat, milk. The milk falls on, it's boiling hot, the whole piece becomes totally forbidden. Now this little drop of milk has amplified its forbidden power 59 times. Right? This is now 59 units of Isser. If this falls into a pot that has only 59 times as big as itself, what's 59 times 59? Let's say 60 times 60 is 3,600. So in other words, now if this doesn't have 60 against it, what does it mean? That the whole thing is forbidden. So we have this one little piece of Isser. Let's say this is a drop of milk. 1 ounce of milk falls into 59, a piece of meat. There's 59 ounces of meat, makes the whole thing forbidden. This 59 ounce of meat falls into a pot that has 3,000 ounces of meat in it, right? 53,000, the whole pot is forbidden. Because in order for the pot to be permissible, it has to have 60 times against this piece. 60 times, what's 60 times 59? About 3,500, let's say. 3,000, it doesn't have 3,000, it only has 3,000. So the whole pot is forbidden just from 1 ounce of milk, makes 3,500 ounces of meat forbidden.
What if you took that further and you took that 3,000, the large pot, pot? That will
maybe according to the Ramah, yes, but according to the Machaber, not, because the Ramah says that everyone says this works in milk and meat, but the Machaber, Yosef Karo, says this principle works only in milk and meat because both of them are permissible. But if you have a forbidden piece of meat, right, that falls in, it doesn't make all those other pieces intrinsically usher. It makes them forbidden, but it makes them forbidden because they haven't got enough to negate the Isser. So if one more piece would fall in that would bring it up to 60, then it would make the whole thing permissible. We'll talk about this later, God willing. See you all tomorrow.